if we could at this time, we're going to go ahead and ask everybody to take their seats and have the doors closed. We will go ahead and get this committee meeting of natural resources underway. Let everybody kind of take their seats. All right. Is Representative Fugit, are you listening to us right now? Are you online? Give you a minute to hit your mute button.
Got it, where?
Is that you? Is that Representative Fugit? Oh, Duplessis. I think we saw that Representative.
Yeah.
How about I go get that?
We hear him. That's okay. What I was going to do, I was just going to ask Representative Fugit if he'd say prayer, but if you could just bow your head, we'll say prayer real quick as we start here. Heavenly Father, we thank you for each and every member of this committee and this day that you have given us to do the work of the people. We ask that you watch over all of us as we continue to do our jobs and take care of our families and watch over the work of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We ask all these things in your heavenly name. Amen. This time, if you'll join me, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And at this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the report. For those of you at home or that are working from your office or remotely, as you know, please state if you're in your office, if you're in your district, and we'll give you a little bit extra time to be able to hit that mute button, because I know when I'm trying to participate from home, it's difficult to hit that on your phone, so we'll give you a little bit extra time to make sure that everybody's accounted for. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Carpenter, Senator Caslin, Senator Embry, Senator Harper Angel.
Present remotely in my district.
Thank you. Senator Schickel, Senator Southworth, Senator Turner, Senator Webb, Senator Westerfield, Senator Wheeler, Representative Blanton, Representative Bowling,
Here in person.
Representative Bridges.
Present remotely from District 3.
Thank you. Representative Birch, Representative Cantrell, Representative Dossett, Representative Dotson.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Representative Duplessis.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Representative Flannery.
Present in person.
Representative Fugate. Representative Johnson.
Present in person.
Representative Kirk McCormick.
Present in the room.
Representative Marzian.
Present in my annex office upstairs.
Thank you. Representative Miles.
Present in the room.
Representative Gibbons Prunty.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Representative Scott.
Present in District 41.
Thank you. Representative Stevenson. Representative Wesley. Representative White.
Present in my District 99.
Thank you. Co-Chair Smith.
Present.
And Co-Chair Gooch.
Okay, looks like we have a quorum. So at this time, I'm going to ask for us to approve the minutes of not only this meeting, but of our previous meeting.
Chairman Smith, Chairman Gooch, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to present to you this morning. Let me get this up and shared with the group. Maybe. Here we go. Hopefully everyone can now see the screen. Again, thank you for allowing me to be here this morning or this afternoon. There's a couple things I want to do today. Is first, I want to just kind of give a quick update on Big Rivers, where we are. Some of you are very familiar with Big Rivers, and we've been through a significant transformation. Okay. Okay. So we've been through a significant transformation over the last few years, and I want to just kind of give a brief update on that. And then some of you are new, so you may not be familiar with Big Rivers. The second thing I want to do today is talk a little bit about the coal fleet and how important that coal fleet is to the electric grid, not just here in Kentucky, but nationally as well. So Big Rivers was formed in 1961. We employ about 400 employees, and we essentially work surrounding the 7 values that you see on the screen, safety being our number one core value, and we'll discuss that a little more in depth later. Big Rivers is owned by 3 distribution co-ops, Kennergy and Henderson, Meade County and Brandenburg, and Jackson Purchase in Paducah. Together, those 3 co-ops serve about 121,000 homes and businesses across 22 counties. If you look at our service territory, it's essentially parallel with the Ohio River, about 3 counties south of the river, from Paducah all the way to Brandenburg. All 4 of us, the 3 distribution co-ops and Big Rivers, is regulated by the Kentucky Public Service Commission. We have about 1,300 miles of transmission line. We own 936 megawatts of generation, actually generating plants. We also have 178 megawatts of hydropower from the Southeastern Power Association. And then we are in the process of installing 260 megawatts of solar from 3 upcoming solar projects. Our own generation consists of a combustion turbine in our Seabury facility, 65 megawatts. It's capable of burning natural gas or number 2 fuel. Our Robert Greene plant at Seabury is currently on coal, and we will be converting that to natural gas during the second quarter of 2022. And then DB Wilson is our coal plant, and one that we're very proud of. It's it is one of the most competitive, cost competitive plants in the country. Again, we take 178 megawatts of SEPA power. We're second only to TVA. TVA is the only entity that takes more SEPA hydropower than Big Rivers. And then here's our 3 solar facilities, 160 megawatts in Henderson, 60 megawatts in McCracken County, and 40 megawatts in Meade. We've got that spread out across our service territory and our footprint. So we about 1,375 megawatts total available resources to Big Rivers. Along with our 1,300 miles of transmission line, we have about 16,000 acres of right-of-way that we have to maintain annually, and we have 20 transmission interconnections with 6 surrounding utilities in our service territory. As I mentioned earlier, safety is our number one core value. We're very proud of our safety record. You can tell a lot about a company from its safety performance. We've earned 53 Governor's Health and Safety Awards. That's more than any other entity in the state of Kentucky. Along with that, we have also won 5 consecutive Kentucky Employers Mutual Insurance Destiny Award. That's KEMI. That's who performs for us on our workers' comp insurance. And they give that award out to the company with the lowest experience modification rate. And for 5 consecutive years, we've had the...
Bob, just was going to ask you, could you explain SEPA to our members so they understand what you're talking about?
Yeah, so SEPA is the Southeast Power Administration, and it is essentially hydropower along the Cumberland River. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if anyone has any questions, please speak up. I want it to be kind of interactive, so if you have questions along the way, and then obviously I'll have time for questions at the end. Won't go through all these stats, but I do think there's a couple very important here. Our transmission employees, which is our linemen, they have gone 6 years without a recordable injury. That's an OSHA recordable, and if you're in business, you understand an OSHA recordable could be as much as just smashing your thumb and going to the doctor and getting a couple stitches, or your back hurts and you get a prescription medication. So that's pretty remarkable that they work in the conditions in the environment that they work in without any OSHA recordables for 6 years. If you look at our incident statistics, we're about half of the national average. So again, very strong performance from safety. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we've been through a significant transformation over the last 7 years. And that transformation started when the Century Aluminum left the Big River system in 2013. During that time when the smelters left, they were 60% of our total load and 60% of our revenue, and we lost that in a 12-month time frame. So we had to go through this transformation to do the right thing for our customer owners, member owners, and so immediately we put a mitigation plan together. It was a very aggressive plan to replace that lost load. Most people called that plan very overly optimistic, and to be honest with you, that was politically correct for saying you guys are crazy. There's no way you can do what you say you're going to do, but we were successful in completing that mitigation plan. It all started with short-term contracts while we to help stabilize our electric rates to our member owners, and then while we could negotiate long-term power contracts. In 2015 was our first success after the smelters left in 13. The PSC approved wholesale power contracts with 3 Nebraska entities of 65 megawatts. That goes through 2026. Along with this mitigation plan, we put together a very ambitious economic development rate to try to encourage local existing industries to expand, as well as getting new industry to locate in our service territories. And we've been very successful with that, and I'll show you some of the results of that here shortly. And then we continue to enter into long-term power contracts. We entered into with KYMEA, that's the Kentucky Municipal Energy Agency. It's 12 cities across the state. We serve 100 megawatts to those folks for 10 years. And then we entered into an all-requirements contract with the city of Owensboro for a 6.5-year contract with them. So here's our mitigation plan success. We were like a typical utility in 2012. We had about 300 megawatts of length. That's pretty average for a co-op or for a utility our size. But in 2013 is when the smelters left our system. So we went from having 300 megawatts of length to 1,200 megawatts of length, and that's huge. So we put our mitigation plan in place. We idled our Coleman station. You can see the green as we start going down. We made the Nebraska sales. Our very aggressive economic development rate convinced the Laris rolling mill to do an expansion in Hallsville. That was about a 30 megawatt expansion. We had KYMA that I spoke of earlier, 100 megawatts, OMU 180 megawatts. We landed Nucor Steel up in Meade County in Brandenburg, and that's 200 megawatts. And then we exited a contract with Henderson Municipal Power and Light, which got rid of about 197 megawatts for us. So we used both sides of the equation. We had to idle. We had to make some tough decisions and retire some generation, but then we also were able to find 640 megawatts of new load. You can see out there in 2021, we just announced Pratt Paper will be coming to Henderson. That's a 34 megawatt load, $400 million investment. Nucor was a $1.5 billion investment. And then we have Blockware. Blockware is a cryptocurrency facility. They do data mining for cryptocurrency. It's in Paducah. It's going to be located in Paducah. It starts out at about a 30 megawatt load, and it's going to increase in 2 years to 60 megawatts. We expect Blockware will probably go online within the next 60 days. So what we've kind of achieved was what most people said was impossible. We've had record-breaking safety performance. We were able to replace 640 megawatts of that 850 megawatts of load. when the smelters gave notice, the investment credit rating agencies, they downgraded Big Rivers to 2 notches below investment grade. We've been able to claw back, and through our strong performance, we are now investment grade credit rating from all 3 credit rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. And one thing that may surprise you is we're one of the leading carbon reduction entities, utilities across the country, and I'll show you more on that here shortly. But what we've done is pretty remarkable, and we've done it economically. We did it on a what we call a reasonable pace. All this has allowed us to keep our electric rates stable to our member owners, and not only did we keep it stable, but we return money back to our members now, directly back to our member owners. Through the mechanism that we have through the PSC, we returned $33.3 million back to our customer owners this year, and we expect that number to be around $42 million in 2022. So the second part of my presentation, I really want to focus a little bit on the coal fleet and how important the coal fleet is to the grid, both in Kentucky and across the nation. There's things that the coal fleet provides that no other resource can: reliability, resilience, affordable electricity, fuel security, fuel diversity, and it's very dispatchable. It's always there when I need it. And people get confused with reliability and resiliency. There's a difference. Reliability is, you keep the lights on, but resiliency is, can you keep the lights on in extreme weather events like what we've seen in February and what we saw during the polar vortex in 2014. So coal provides that because it has fuel security, unlike any other fuel resource out there. Last year, Kentucky's electric rates were 20% lower than the national average, and we were 20% lower because we're sitting on top of probably the most valuable natural resource this country's ever had, and that's coal. And we've been able to optimize that for the residents of Kentucky. 70% of the electricity generated in Kentucky comes from coal, and we'll talk more about that shortly. But by comparison, only 20% of electricity is provided by coal across the nation when you look at the nation's average. But again, that's why our rates are 20% lower than everyone else's. That's why we have opportunities to get economic development projects like Ford that just announced, like Nucor Steel, like Pratt Paper, like the mining, these data mining companies are coming to Kentucky because of our low rates. Big Rivers is a member of the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. It's called MISO. It's a regional transmission organization. They serve 15 states and part of Canada. They serve 42 million people across their footprint. And MISO relies on coal more than any other RTO in the nation. They have 60,000 megawatts of the coal fleet. That's a fourth of the total coal fleet of our country. And like MISO, or like us, MISO is concerned about premature coal retirements. They understand it jeopardizes reliability, resilience, and affordability. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. President Biden's coal carbon goals is to be carbon-free by 2035. This is not possible to achieve this goal and maintain reliability and resiliency with the current technology. There's no technology out there that will allow us to do what they're wanting to do. It's not that it can't be done, it just can't be done at the pace that they're want it to be done. We need a dispatchable resources when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. And Texas is a good example of that back in February. California is a good example. We'll talk a little bit more about those examples here shortly. Now, battery storage can be a game changer, and I fully believe that battery storage technology will come around, but it's not there yet. Right now, typically you see the largest installations of battery around 100 to 200 megawatts, and far as economics, about the longest duration is about 4 hours, and so anything above 4 hours is just cost prohibitive to even install. Coal and natural gas, they provide 92%. Of Kentucky's electricity, and that would have to be replaced with coal, with solar, and with wind in Kentucky, and it's just unrealistic and unaffordable at this point in time. It's not impossible, but it is going to increase rates significantly if we try to go too far too fast. The customers are going to pay for both. There is still coal plants out there that's not fully amortized. They still have remaining life in those units. And so someone's going to have to pay for those units as well as paying for the new solar and wind turbines as they're installed. So the customers are going to pay twice for the same amount of electricity. To replace coal and natural gas with solar in Kentucky, it'd take 39,000 megawatts to replace it. And to kind of put that in perspective, that's 391,000 acres of solar panels. And we forget about how large a area it really takes for solar. That's 611 square miles. And from a U.S. perspective, it would take at least 600 times more wind and solar than we have today to replace all the fossil fuel. And again, when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing, someone's going to have to do without. EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute, estimates that the new wind and solar, plus the transmission to deliver that solar and wind, is going to cost us about $1.7 trillion. At the same time, we have other countries like China. They continue to build new coal-fired power plants, and they increase their carbon emissions. At the same time, the U.S. is retiring its coal fleet and reducing carbon emissions, and you're starting to see more and more rolling blackouts across different states. You've seen it in California. You've seen it in Texas. I think what you're going to see this winter, you're going to see some of the states on the eastern seaboard they're going to lean on their coal rather than their natural gas and their renewables. Here's kind of an overall view of our coal fleet across our country. To start with, there's 2 million megawatts of coal across in the world today. 1.1 million of that roughly is in China. So they own about half of the coal fleet of the world. And not only do they own 1.1 up and operating today, they've got 247,000 megawatts under construction today. Now, how's those numbers compared to the U.S.? Today, the United States has 234,000 megawatts in operation. So besides the 1.1 million China has operating today, they have another 247,000 megawatts under construction, more than what we have operating. So unfortunately, what we're trying to do, I'm afraid, is really not going to be noticeable. We spoke about California. They rely more on solar than any other state. They provide about 30% of their state's electricity from solar. Last August, California was forced to impose rolling blackouts on about 2 million people, and because they didn't have dispatchable energy. Their solar didn't show up, their wind didn't show up, so they decided to import fossil fuel from their surrounding states. Unfortunately for them, the transmission line that imports that power failed, and that's why they had to do rolling blackouts on those 2 million people. So what that means is 30% renewables is at this point in time in today's technology is not reliable. We cannot run the grid. John Baer, who's the CEO of MISO, has publicly expressed his concern about trying to operate the grid with more than 30% renewables. And there's no studies showing that the nation's grid can be reliable with all wind and solar. Again, battery technology is not proven, and it's not economic at this time. I think it will be, but it's just not there yet, and we don't want to go too far too fast. That doesn't mean we're not trying to do our part in trying to reduce carbon. As I mentioned, we're one of the nation's leading utilities in carbon reduction. If you look at our carbon reduction, we're down 71% from our 2010 levels. But what we've done is we've tried to put a balanced, diverse portfolio together for our member owners, what we like to refer to as the all-above approach. And that way, when regardless of what kind of administration's in Washington, it's not going to wipe out our whole fleet with the stroke of one pen. Here's our carbon reductions. You'll see in 2010 we were emitting about 14 million tons of carbon annually. In 2020, we emitted 4 million tons. I won't go through all these stats, but you'll see that our carbon reductions, we're 10 to 20 years ahead of the surrounding utilities' goals that they've set. All these utilities have set sustainability goals by 2030. And again, you can see we're already meeting most of their goals or exceeding their goals some 10 to 20 years in advance of them. So we're not against trying to do our part. We just think you have to do it in a manner that's economical to the member owners. I'll move through this. This is just another slide showing our carbon reduction since 2005. So here's what our future energy mix is going to look like. It's a diverse portfolio. We have 178 megawatts of hydropower. We have 260 megawatts of solar. Both of those resources are carbon free. We have 417 megawatts of coal, and we're going to have 470 megawatts of natural gas. We still have coal. We think coal is important. You know, while I don't have a lot of stats to show you, but I will tell you my personal opinion is in 2024, there's the people that have coal plants are going to be glad they have them, and the people that don't have them is going to wish they had one. And when all these plants start closing in 2023 to meet the existing environmental regulations, the people that have coal is going to be glad they have them. So there are a lot of pending solar installations in Kentucky. So I want to go through some stats with you because to me they were pretty astonishing. You know, if you look at Big River Service Territory, there's almost 3,900 megawatts of solar in the queue, meaning they're wanting to build 3,900 megawatts of solar just in our 22 counties. That's almost 39,000 acres of solar panels. Likewise, you look at, you know, if you think about that, that's 61 square miles just in Big River Service Territory. So to put it in perspective, it's a mile wide from Louisville to Lexington. That's a pretty large solar field. Kentucky, likewise, 12,000 megawatts, 120,000 acres. These are just pending solar projects that are currently pending. It's 187 and a half square miles. That's 95% of Oldham County that's in the queue today. So it takes up a lot of farm and agricultural property. And then obviously BISO that we're in, they have about 90,000 megawatts, which is a little over 9 million acres.
Bob, if I may, just for the members to know what MISO is, this is a non-for-profit members operated organization responsible for, I guess, 15 states across the area to make sure that their grid is up and running and stays sustainable. You'll hear a lot of acronyms around us and text me like you've been doing. I've been getting some texts from members asking me what these acronyms are. So that's what MISO is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just some kind of final thoughts. We rely on our coal, but we're also investing in renewable energy and carbon-free energy as well. We're using our all-above approach to give us a real nice, diverse, low-cost generation portfolio. While we have 260 megawatts of solar, I do want to add that 100 megawatts of that solar is totally dedicated to Nucor steel. We're seeing more and more entities when they move into the state to look to locate here. They're interested in renewable energy. But we've tried to put the all-above approach together, what we think is the best strategy for our customers, and we've been able to, again, do it very economically. We support the transition, but we think it should be at a more reasonable pace than 2030. So, Mr. Chairman, I have a video here that I would like to show you if we have time. I know I've been kind of lengthy here, but I think it's a good video, and I think it's something that shows, this is just not my opinion. This video shows opinions across the country. Some of them are state regulators, utility regulators across the country. I don't know if you have time. It's about a 3 or 4 minute video.
We do. I've got 2 members that have requested questions. Is it okay if I go ahead and have them ask their questions real quick before you do your video?
Absolutely.
Okay. First, I have Representative DePlucy, who has a question.
Thank you for your presentation. It's been quite interesting, and I also want to thank you for the good work you've done for your members. You're actually returning money. You're lowering carbon. That's doing a great job. So thank you. But I do have a few questions. Mr. Chairman, is it okay if can you indulge me on just a couple?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So, you mentioned that your carbon footprint is down some 70%. Your load is as well. So I'm sure that some of that's due to your load, but not all of it. What would you say, what technology are you using besides solar to lower your carbon footprint?
Mr. Chairman, is it okay if I answer the question? Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, we started off and we're using obviously the solar that we're bringing online, the 260 megawatts of solar. We're optimizing the hydropower that we have, and then we've closed some power plants as well, and then we've also put a big emphasis on heat rate, which is kind of like gas mileage for most of you. So the less coal I have to burn to get the same amount of generation, I can reduce my emissions as well. So we've put a significant emphasis on heat rate. We've dropped our heat rate about 6% over the last 3 years, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's huge.
Yeah, that's definitely huge. Okay, thank you. And my second question is kind of a little bit more jumbled, perhaps, but this legislature has spent a lot of time on net metering and solar, and we're seeing utilities like yourself installing solar, which I support whatever you need to do to do your business. And tied into that, we have automotive industry that said by 2030, many manufacturers are going to be 100% EVs, and at least 50% for almost all the manufacturers by 2030 is what I'm reading. And from what I understand, we don't really have the infrastructure to support that. On top of that, solar has contributed to the duck curve. Yet you're using solar. So I'm a little confused, because that was one of the major arguments against net metering, was how the duck curve affected the base load, which you absolutely, and I support coal as a base load. I think that's wonderful. But how do you get around the duck curve with your solar, and how do you see that affecting the EV market that's going to be putting EV charging stations all over the place in the next 10 years?
So let me start by answering the duck curve question. What we're currently doing from that perspective is trying to limit the total amount of solar that we have. No more than 30% of our portfolio will be solar or renewables that can't be dispatchable. And so if we can keep that around that 30% and we still have dispatchable energy in a coal and gas plant, then we have the ability to help offset that duck curve. So I think that's important, that you have to have dispatchable energy of some sort. What I tell a lot of folks is, don't look at it as just coal. Coal actually helps solar installations. Anytime you have a dispatchable generator, it complements the renewables that can't be dispatched. So that's how you get around it. You got to make sure you don't get too much, and that's what MISO is concerned about as well. While they're thinking 30%, anything above that's going to be tough for them to manage the power grid. On the EV station, and I'm glad you brought that question up, because that's another issue about trying to be carbon free by 2030, because we're trying to be carbon free with the existing generation. But if you just take a look one day, you sit outside and watch the number of cars go by and think that 50% of those cars are going to be electric by 2030, it's going to put more upward pressure on the amount of electricity that has to be produced. And no one's even taken that into consideration at this point. And it's going to put a lot of upward pressure on we're trying to get carbon free with what we have, and now we're going to add all that additional load on, and we've got to try to figure out a way to get carbon free from them as well. So the EV stations is going to be a challenge for all of us. But make no mistake, I'm all for the electric vehicle, because I'm an electric generator, and they've got to plug that thing in somewhere.
Does that wrap up your questions?
I suppose it does, but I guess it just leaves me wondering if my rough math, as I was trying to listen to your numbers, you already have around 20% solar in your portfolio. Does that sound right?
That's correct, sir. So
if you have homeowners and businesses adding to to the grid with their own installations, it would be pretty easy for your 30% number to be toppled outside of your control. And we don't have batteries to deal with the duck curve, as you mentioned. So it seems like you have a pretty high percentage, considering that we can have a lot of other folks be adding to it. I'm just wondering how you're going to deal with it, but I know you got it figured out.
Yeah, so we have about 20% of solar. Your math is correct. So when we look at distributed generation from the homeowners, that gives us about a 10% cushion, because even though our hydro is carbon free, it's dispatchable. So I can dispatch that hydro plant as I need it, either on peak or off peak, to help with the duck curve. So I'm giving myself about 10% of room. Looking at the distributed generation, what I call coming from the homeowners. And we have a pretty large concentration. Actually, Kenergy is their service territory. They probably, in a percentage-wise, they have more solar than any entity on a percentage basis, not total volumes, but percentage.
Bob,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me those questions.
Very good, thank you. We have two other members that have requested to be able to ask you a question. One is Representative Givens-Prunty. Representative Prunty, if you're on, I'm going to go ahead and yield the microphone to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I just want to thank you for a calm, rational explanation of how coal needs to be kept in the mix. I represent the 15th District, and of course, TVA was there, and units 1, 2, and 3 have come down, and we're hurting. And if you need some coal, we got some coal to send you. But you have echoed the case I tried to make to the TVA board before they shut down Unit 3, and I hope that we can all stay rational in this country, at least in this state, to fight for coal. My question comes with the electrical vehicles. What powers those charging stations? Someone brought to me, and I haven't looked into it, but they said something about being charged with or fueled by diesel. Is that true, or how would they be provided electricity for the charging stations for the electrical vehicles?
Well, I think it depends on where the charging station is located. We're actually going to have some that is going to be powered by right off of our grid. You could charge them with a diesel generator, but that seems to be a little counterproductive on what you're trying to accomplish. But I see, when you start going down the road and you're starting to see truck stops and service stations, I think you're going to start seeing electric vehicles there, and you're going to see them, putting in bigger services, electrical services, and for the electrical charging stations.
Well, I appreciate that. That was my thought when they told me that. I thought that doesn't even make any sense. So that's why I asked the question. But thank you for the answer, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the indulgence.
Very good. Thank you, Representative. I saw yesterday in transportation that they have developed the first fully electric airplane. It looks like a Cessna 150 or something like that. Be very interesting to see how this thing operates. But we have Representative Miles. That's our next question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Bob, for being here with us today in the presentation. I'm probably going to switch it from right now you're where you are of trying to balance, I guess you'd say, the different percentages and things like that. And I guess I'm going to ask forward thinking as far as the solar that you currently have in place. And as far as the state, we're starting to look at trying to figure out what our plan needs to be statewide on the solar farms, the individuals on their own property, things like that. So what is your all's plan in place whenever those have to be either replaced or disposed of and things like that? And do you have any suggestions as far as what the state needs to do to have a safeguard to protect our citizens for once these go in place? Because as you will know, production agriculture is important to myself and others. And once we take that out of production agriculture, I don't know if it'll ever go back. Once something's taken out, it typically doesn't go back. So do you have any any golden wisdom you can share with us on suggestions?
I don't have any golden wisdom. I get asked a lot that very question about what should we do, and I get that asked from farmers. As you know, I live in a rural community, and my family's been farmers forever. And but what I tell them is when you're signing up for solar, make sure there's some kind of reclamation at the end of your contract. When you put a 20-year contract in place, make sure you've got some kind of reclamation in there where the company can't just walk away and leave you a field full of I-beams sticking up out of the ground and some hazardous chemicals in the solar panels that you've got to dispose of.
Yes, please follow it.
Okay, and I guess going back to that, do you think at the state level, if there should be any in place? I mean, we talk about the coal mines and making sure we have something in the event that a coal mine, abandoned coal mine, things like that, of reclamation. Do you think that we need to have anything at the state level to protect our citizens from that abuse?
I do.
And I will also say, just follow up, I think Kentucky has been, obviously, you've seen the regulation we love to throw on coal and everybody else, that I think that there's opportunities for solar in Kentucky, but they will fall under the same guidelines and scrutiny that we've done to coal, natural gas, and everybody else. So we want good partners in the state of Kentucky, but we want responsible partners, and we're not going to leave anybody neglected that decides that they want to come in and do this and not consider that we're going to make sure that these things are cleaned up whenever they leave. Bob, thank you. Go ahead with your presentation, and if we've got any other questions, we can ask you at the end, but we'll try to get back on our timeline here. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. And I may need some help here. Well, I did, but it keeps going to the next slide. So here we go. Do what? Okay. So it looks like we're having some technical difficulties on the slide. Let me try one other thing here if I can. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to come up. So, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'd be glad to email the video out to whoever would want to see it.
Yeah, please do, because I think we'd be interested in seeing it. We appreciate you putting it together for us today, and apologize for the technical difficulties, if you will. Members, we have Representative Chairman Gooch has got a question for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Bob, thanks for everything you do with Big Rivers. You're in my area and have been great citizens there for a very long time. And I'm glad that you're able to replace that century load and really carry on, because we need you there. But one of the things that I'm having a little bit of difficulty with is I don't have a problem with you guys, as a utility in Kentucky, going out and developing some solar to meet the demand that some of your customers are asking for. But I think what people don't realize is what we're talking about here today. And, you're regulated by the Public Service Commission, but what we're talking about now is all this merchant solar where people are actually harassing our farmers trying to lease their land and develop really large solar fields of merchant solar that's then sold into the MISO and PJM grid, unregulated by the Public Service Commission. The only thing that I think they may do is on the siting board, they may have, they may kind of be in charge of helping get that started, but they really have no regulation. And where I'm starting to have problems, we talk about resiliency, and to me, reliability to me is the ability to generate electricity when it's needed. And as you said, resiliency is being able to generate electricity when you have these huge, temperature changes and that sort of thing. But in order to have that reliability and that resiliency, we have to have base load generation. And what I'm concerned about is when we allow these unregulated solar entities to sell power to MISO. They are, in essence, taking away power that might have been sold from a baseload generator. And I'm just wondering, at some point, that's got to affect the viability of those baseload generators that aren't already slated to be closed. The ones that want to stay open, their ability to stay open. And let me just give you an example. I'll make it kind of a long question, but I just came back from the Southern States Energy Board in Oklahoma City, and when they had the polar vortex back in whenever it was earlier this year, they have about 40% of their electricity that comes from wind, and they have about 40% that comes from natural gas, and 10% from coal, and then some of the other things, hydro and solar and that sort of thing. But when the polar vortex hit, their windmill blades all froze up because of the freezing fog. A lot of their wellheads on the natural gas side froze up. And they were able to keep their lights on because they took that 10% of coal that they were accustomed to, and those generators provided them 54% of their power to get through that situation. And my question is, how can a unit that's only getting 10% of the market be able to remain viable, where they can sit there and be able to ramp up 5 times the production? Can they do that? When all the power is being sold somewhere else and they're not getting those sales. I don't know if you understand, if I phrased my question right or not, but.
No, you're right on target. You're spot on. It's difficult to keep a coal plant running at 10%. That's why we're converting our green unit. I will say in Kentucky, the Kentucky Public Service Commission has always favored having steel in the ground rather than relying on the market. And that's what happens a lot of times with these merchant solar plants. They're hoping you're going to rely on the market and not have steel in the ground. But our commission has traditionally preferred steel in the ground. And converting our green unit is a perfect example. When we went to the commission with that project, it was essentially the same price-wise. To either lean on the market or convert it to gas, but the risk of converting to gas was much less than the risk of leaning on the market. And most of those solar projects that I just mentioned to you that's in the queue, most of those solar projects are just merchant projects. So you're right, but we're all leaning on our coal, and that's why I believe in 2024 you're going to be glad you have coal. While we have 30%, about 33% actually of renewable energy in our capacity side, when you look at the actual energy that we generate, we're only generating about 22% of renewable energy. Most of the energy, we're still leaning on coal for the majority of our energy.
And one other thing that's happening too, I think on January the 20th of this year, I had our staff get together and write down the prices of some of the energy commodities and that sort of thing, as far as the price of gasoline that was probably $1.80 something then, that's now over $3.15, $3.20 or whatever. And we've seen natural gas go up. What is today, about $6 maybe, somewhere in that range?
I haven't looked today, but it actually delivered to our system yesterday was $7.67.
Yeah, and that's probably from about $3 maybe, or
about $3 to $3.50 is what we typically see.
Yeah, so I mean, in just 8 or 9 months, we've seen the price pretty much triple, and that's going to have an effect on rates as well. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
If I could
Sure.
add one thing there, Mr. Chairman. So there's a real disconnect between the gas market and the power markets, and that's got to be corrected. And what a lot of the things that you saw in California, you see in Texas, and you see in some of these other states, and we even saw it in Kentucky in 2014 during the polar vortex. So when you have these extreme weather events, a lot of the gas either gets interrupted or the price goes up. I've got a good friend in Texas he runs a G&T just like Big Rivers in Texas, and he's got a brand new state-of-the-art gas combustion turbine, and his gas went from being delivered at $360 to $900 overnight.
Yeah.
And so his unit was no longer economical. And the good thing with coal, I've already got 60 to 90 days on the ground, so I know exactly for the next 90 days what it's going to cost me to generate. Yeah. And typically those extreme weather events only last a couple of weeks.
Yeah. One more question, Mr. Chairman. I know we're getting kind of low. Bob, we're expecting that we may get a lot of money, from millions of dollars from the federal money and infrastructure, and some of it would to be to help improve the grid system. And my question to you is, if we were to receive this money in Kentucky, where is the best place for the legislature to appropriate this money to ensure we make the right investments to improve Kentucky's grid system for consumers? Any ideas?
Yeah, I would need to think about that one a little longer.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, that's a little, that gets a little deeper, but
Sure.
But I will tell you, we need some additional transmission for our electric system, but you still have to have generators. You know, solar and wind power does not generate static bars, and you have to have static bars. Power plants, if you look at power plant, they're not just thrown out there because somebody said that's where I want to put it. You look at our power plants, where were they? Right beside the smelters, right? You got to have the, dynamic bars for those huge loads next to these industrial customers, and you can't get that from a transmission line. You got to have a generator close by.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, Bob. Thank you for your presentation. I see no other questions at this time, but we will take your video and we'll try to email a link to that to all the members so they can watch the presentation that you brought for us today. And if you have no further comments, then we thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, this time we have, let's see, Carrie Johnson, the Division of Water. I don't see. I'm sorry, where are they? Oh, they're online. You're on Zoom. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes. Sure.
Do you have any?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We see
Great.
Slide that's up right now in front of us. Do you have anybody else joining you for your presentation?
No, sir. Just myself for the short presentation today, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions from either the co-chairs or the committee.
All right, very good. Well, we'll turn it over to you, Carrie. Take off.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, committee members. My name is Carrie Johnson. I'm the director of the Kentucky Division of Water within the Energy and Environment Cabinet, and I'll be sharing a short presentation today, but basically providing an overview and an opportunity about the Kentucky Dam Safety Program and proposed updates that the cabinet has drafted for KRS 151. So I'll make the transition to my slides, which I should be able to flip through pretty easily here. So KRS 151 is a longstanding statute and actually provides the Energy and Environment Cabinet broad authority for several different activities. Everything from dam safety to floodplain management to groundwater monitoring to the Kentucky River Authority are outlined within KRS 151. One of the things about KRS 151 is it's been a good law for a long time. It's been around since about, it was originally written in 1966. So some of the terminology that is inherent in the statutory language needs to be updated just to reflect current industry practices and current programs. In fact, some of the language within parts of 151 haven't been revised since the 70s and the 80s. So what we are hoping to do, what we are proposing to do as not only the Division of Water, but with our partners in the Department for Environmental Protection within the Energy and Environment Cabinet, are looking to basically bring those statutes up to industry standard when it comes to language, but repeal any statute that have been made by obsolete by any federal code or regulations that have been promulgated over the past 30 to 40 years or so. The major update to the proposed language within KRS 151 is an addition to existing language, and that is a requirement for dam owners to draft emergency action plans for those dams that are classified at either high or significant hazard. And what the cabinet would propose there is to work with those dam owners with a phased implementation via regulation that would basically give those dam owners a glide path in order to help meet not only drafting the emergency action plans, but to work with the cabinet and utilize some of the tools that we've developed. And that's largely what the presentation today focuses on. I mentioned dam hazard classifications. One of the things I want to make very clear is that a hazard classification when it comes to a dam isn't related to the condition of the dam, whether the dam is imminently failing or whether it's the most well-constructed dam in the Commonwealth. The hazard classification is based on the implications should the dam fail. And largely, we classify dams within the Commonwealth with three different classifications. High hazard dams are those dams that should failure occur, we at the cabinet would anticipate loss of life or major infrastructure. Those dams are inspected by the Division of Water each and every year, those high hazard dams. Significant hazard dams are located such that failure may cause loss of a major piece of infrastructure or significant damage to property, but loss of human life wouldn't be anticipated. And we inspect those dams every 3 years. So on a 3-year cycle, our dam safety personnel do a full-blown inspection and certificate of inspection on each of those structures. And then finally, we have those low hazard classified dams. And those are the structures that are built mainly in such a manner that if they were to fail, they would fail right into the downstream river or creek, and we wouldn't anticipate any type of major damage with any type of failure with those structures. And the cabinet inspects those dams on a 5-year cycle. I think it's also important for us to, clearly define what is considered a dam as outlined in KRS 151. And it's a pretty simple classification. Basically, it's the lesser of a structure that is either 25 feet from the toe of the dam to the crest of the dam, which basically being the bottom of the dam to the top of the dam, or a structure that impounds 50 acre feet or more. So if you think of an acre foot, basically 1 acre foot is an amount of water, 1 acre in size, that is 1 foot deep. So you, in order to do the calculations for 50 acre feet, it could be a 50 acre structure, 1 foot deep, a 25 acre structure, 2 feet deep, and so forth. But basically, depending upon the size of the reservoir that's impounded by the structure or the height of the dam is how the cabinet classifies whether a dam should be regulated. We get that authority through provisions in KRS 151, and that's mainly outlined in KRS 151-250 through 299, and applies to all dams in Kentucky except for those owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or the Tennessee Valley Authority. And the reason that the division doesn't regulate the federal structures is because the federal dam safety regulations are actually more strict than the state requirements are. So we default to those federal agencies for ownership and operations and maintenance and inspections of those dams. We also work with our friends on the other side of the cabinet in the Department for Natural Resources for surface mining related dams. So those structures that are constructed as part of the SMACRA permit must also meet requirements that are outlined in KRS 151 and the resultant regulations in 401 KR Chapter 4. But as I mentioned, our friends in DNR, those dams fall under their purview. One of the things that the cabinet has worked on over the past year or so is we've developed some fairly robust mapping tools, and I'll go through some of those tools in subsequent slides. But based on our analysis, which does include some assumptions, But based on the analysis that we conducted, high hazard dams across the Commonwealth, about 1% of the state's population, or about 45,000 Kentuckians, live downstream of a high hazard dam or in a dam inundation zone. So we've taken it upon ourselves as a division in the cabinet to coordinate very closely with emergency management agencies across the Commonwealth to help not only get the word out, but to form partnerships on managing and communicating the inherent risks associated with dams. Just real quickly, we have about 1,000 dams. In fact, I think the actual number is about 970 dams in 115 of Kentucky's 120 counties across the Commonwealth. Of those, 180 are those high hazard dams, those dams that, should they fail, the cabinet would expect some type of loss of life be associated with them, and 127 significant hazard dams. So those dams, should a failure occur, we would anticipate some type of loss of significant property or infrastructure, but not necessarily a loss of life. And you can see that they're very well scattered across the Commonwealth, maybe with a few barren areas, so to speak, in the Knobs region, which makes a lot of sense because it's never good to build a dam on a sinkhole, and subsequently in Eastern Kentucky, where we have water resources that may not require impoundments. So what the cabinet does whenever we go out and do our dam inspections, and again, high hazard dams we inspect every year, significant hazard dams we inspect every 3 years, and low hazard dams every 5 years. We have some established criteria that we utilize to perform what's called a conditions assessment. And this conditions assessment is it's an assessment conducted by our engineers in the dam safety program that does give some inclination on the actual structure, or how we would anticipate the structure behaving under load. And by under load, I mean by basically having a reservoir behind it. So using our conditions assessment criteria, we focus on high and significant hazard dams, and we found that a fair number of those structures are in a condition that is less desirable, so to speak. And I would point towards those that are classified as poor or unsatisfactory as those dams which are a higher priority in needing some type of rehabilitation. And when it comes to dam-related rehabilitation, there's a whole spectrum of things that could be conducted in order to reduce dam-related risks. And that ranges from everything from property buyouts to capital construction on the dam. But we do these rankings in order to help communicate the needs to not only the dam owners, but the dam safety and emergency management officials should a dam-related incident occur. And in fact, we had an incident just this past spring in the city of Jackson in Breathitt County on Panbull Lake Dam. It was luckily the emergency situation panned out to where there wasn't a significant loss of life or property, but it was a dam-related incident that caused us to realize that the reason that the dam safety program exists in the Commonwealth is worthwhile. So when it comes to emergency action plans, this is finally getting, I guess, to the specific aspect or the nitty-gritty of the presentation, so to speak. An emergency action plan is basically a document that outlines responsibilities for dam owners, dam regulatory agencies like the Division of Water, and emergency management agencies, whether that's local, regional, or statewide. Really, the goals of emergency action plan is to encourage development of those documents, but really to encourage skin in the game by all players across the dam-related spectrum. And again, that's owners, that's emergency management, and regulatory agencies. One of the reasons that we like to promote and communicate emergency action action plans is regardless of what regulatory requirements are out there, whether it's state or federal, emergency action plans can actually limit a dam owner's liability should an event on the dam occur, because actions have been taken to manage that risk. And we're part of an association. It's a nationwide association that actually has their executive office in our backyard of Lexington, Kentucky, the Association of State Dam Safety Officials. And we work real closely with those folks to leverage the information they have available when it comes to outreach, but also to get the general word out related to dam safety. When it comes to emergency action plans, really there's 5 main components. Some of my engineers may shoot me for generalizing that, but I like to compartmentalize things that are fairly easy to understand, and a 5-part plan that ranges from everything from responsibilities to how and who is notified and when they're notified, to an actual description of a dam, to the inundation mapping that is conducted, culminates in that emergency action plan that can be leveraged not only by dam owners, but the local emergency management planning committees within county emergency operations plans. So that's been part of our messaging with the emergency management community, is allow us to work with you folks in your LEPCs and in your county emergency operations plans so that we can help manage these dam related risks more holistically. And we've been successful in doing that. We've had several conversations with local and regional emergency managers. But the EAP process is, it's considered a fairly daunting one because it does require action, not only by the dam owner, but also the regulatory agency and the emergency management agency. So just to get into a little bit more detail about inundation mapping, the cabinet has actually performed inundation mapping for all high hazard dams across the state. So about 180 dams have the inundation mapping that would be required to be utilized in an emergency action plan. We've provided a link. Anyone can go in and view these plans. And we've actually gone in and identified using some digital building polygon data, those structures that would be potentially impacted by a dam failure. So all that's available on our web viewer, and we've provided the web link here, and I believe that's going to be provided to the committee. So we would be remiss if we didn't mention the execution piece of emergency action plan, and that really involves the training and the exercise piece. And as a cabinet, where the Energy and Environment Cabinet Division of Water would really look to engage our partners in emergency management and dam owners to implement the EAPs, but also to develop scheduling and exercise programs to ensure that the EAPs are not only functional, but remain up to date. One of the worst things that you can have in an emergency is a plan that is no longer viable because the contact information has either changed or there's been major development in a community and the evacuation routes are different than what they were before. So a plan to not only develop the plan, so to speak, but a plan to keep the plan updated is required. And, when it comes to executing those actual exercises, we engage partners and stakeholders in 3 different manners, basically. And the first being a tabletop, which is a general exercise that allows us to share data back and forth, generally in a virtual setting. But it simulates emergency scenarios so that stakeholders are familiar with the process. Then we move on to functional exercises, which are those which actually engage stakeholders in a personalized setting, but don't go through a full-blown exercise. And that's the culmination of what an EAP exercise would be a full-scale exercise. And generally we would recommend these for large core type structures, although it's always good to have the 3 different levels of exercise considered in any EAP that's developed. So getting to the end here, and I know we've got a lot of information on the slide. There's no way I'll be able to read it on to everyone, but we did want to provide some information on some tools and resources that the cabinet has developed just over the past few years that can be leveraged and can be brought to the table, so to speak, for dam owners to help in this process. The first being the digital mapping tools. We have access to dam inundation mapping tools that are not only usable, but are very responsive. So we've got established partnerships with FEMA and with National Center for Computational Hydroscience at the University of Mississippi, where we can engage a supercomputer to basically support our inundation mapping initiatives. We've also developed a state-specific emergency action template so that we would be happy to share with dam owners and stakeholders. And what we hope to accomplish with this is a simplification on the process to allow dam owners to basically start the process 50 to 60% complete in developing, but not necessarily executing the emergency action plan. And then finally, we have a considerable amount of expertise, over 75 years culmination of expertise in our dam safety program. And they've seen a lot of events and a lot of emergencies and a lot of dam related incidents over the years. And we can provide, and I'm more than happy to provide advice in planning and executing and maintaining any emergency action plan that would be developed. So that being said, I don't know if any questions have come through. It's hard to tell, but I would be happy to answer any questions from the committee, the co-chairs, or whoever else. And again, I appreciate the time to speak today.
Sorry, thank you for your presentation. We have Senator Webb has a question for you.
It's more of a comment. Thanks, Carrie, for continuing to bring this issue forward. I've carried many bills in the last 20 years regarding EAP and dam safety. So it's a good thing. It's much needed, and I appreciate the attention to the issue. Thank you.
Do we have any other members that have questions? All right, very good. Well, Carrie, thank you for your presentation and covering that for us. If we have any other questions, I'm sure our members can reach out to you directly.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
The last of our presentation, it looks like there were some regs that we're going to take up, but we're not today. We're going to give the Department of Fish and Wildlife some more time to review those. But we do have a report, and I think we've got the Deputy Commissioner. Brian, are you online right now with us? Give you a minute to see if you're still there.
Yes, sir, I am here.
Hey, welcome to Natural Resources. Do you want to just quickly go over, touch on the reports we have today in front of us?
Sure. Yeah, so as many of you all know, we have a statutory requirement to report on the status of public lands each year. So we report that by October 1. We did not have a loss in the last year of any public land hunting. And since the baseline of our reporting, we've gained a net of 660,000 acres, I'm pleased to report. So that's over the last 10 years.
Well done. Then were you going to, do you have any comments about the license plate fund, or did you want to touch on that at all? Or?
No, sir, that probably is from the Heritage Land Fund, I would guess.
Yes.
No, sir, it's not our report.
All right, very good. Do we have anybody here that wants to speak on that? I see I have Representative Birch down front. Representative Birch, do you have some a question or statement?
I do have a question.
Please.
Maybe you can answer, maybe you can't. Are hunting license increasing or decreasing? Is there more, or is there less enthusiasm about hunting nowadays than there was, say, 100 years ago when I was a kid?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, statewide, we have a long-term decline. So there's a long-term decline since the 1980s. We've had some areas, for example, of deer hunting by non-residents, the availability of elk hunting permits, and some other specific areas where in recent years we've had an uptick in interest and sales. but both nationwide and statewide, the total participation has declined. And as a percentage of the population, our participation rates have declined as well. So we're working hard to address that. We have programs in place, like other state fish and wildlife agencies, called recruitment, retention, and reactivation, or R3 programs, that are designed to reach out to not only youth like we've done historically, but increasingly more diverse audiences, including urban audiences, to try to get more people participating in fishing and hunting. But yes, to answer your question, we have long-term declines, that is in total numbers of participants and also as a percentage of the population. So it's an excellent question, and it's the reason why historically we've had to periodically increase fees to maintain our budget, because we have fewer participants and therefore each person has to pay a little bit more.
Is there reluctance of farmers allowing people to hunt on their property anymore, or?
That is an issue. We don't directly track that or inventory that per se. We do ask questions in frequent customer surveys. We typically have hunting and fishing license customer surveys that we do each year, or depending on the customer segment, every few years. And we do ask questions about the types of land they hunted, public versus private. And of course we get local information, like what county they hunted in primarily or fished in, information like that. But we don't really ask usually about the changes in availability, and we don't have a direct way to track access to private lands. And so that's a challenging topic for us, and we'd love to have more detailed information, but we just don't have capacity to track that. There's a lot of turnover in private lands, especially smaller properties, non-farm properties. So it's an excellent question, but something we don't have a real good handle on.
I have one other question, Mr. Chairman.
Please go
Has
ahead.
the bringing the elk back into Kentucky and also the deer populations are getting bigger. Have any farmers or any of them been complaining about their crops being destroyed by these animals, or is this finally not become a problem anymore?
That's a good question too, because our elk population, has grown over the last 25 years, since we've had the restoration program from 1997 to 2002. But we've actually seen in the case of the elk, we've actually seen the elk become, as they've been hunted and pursued more by hunters, they've become more remote and more forest dwelling. And so they're actually more away from human habitation and from agriculture than they were originally. So in the case of the elk, we've actually seen less problems, less damage from them. In the case of the deer, I would describe it as fairly consistent, that is fairly stable statewide in terms of the amount of damage that we have from deer. We work with landowners, as you may know. We have a couple of different ways that we work with landowners to encourage hunting as a means of managing that damage, those nuisance problems. One of those is to administer crop depredation permits, where they can then provide those in turn. The landowner can give them to lawful hunters and have the hunters, reduce the population there, which has economic benefits for the local economy, helps the farmer out by reducing the deer numbers and that kind of thing. But I would say on the whole, across the state, it's fairly stable. Our deer numbers statewide are stable at about, we estimate between 750,000 and 1 million. That's one of those things we can't go out and count the deer numbers. We have various ways of indexing the population, of studying, monitoring the trends. But based on our population models, we're showing a fairly stable trend statewide in the deer numbers. Our biggest, largest numbers, the most dense populations are what we call Zone 1 counties, where you have the most liberal deer seasons, the harvest opportunities statewide. And hunters can actually, in those counties, which is primarily central Kentucky and western Kentucky, selected counties where there is a lot of agriculture, hunters have opportunity to harvest unlimited does. unlimited antlerless deer. And the typical hunter usually only harvests 1 or 2 antlerless or antler deer each year total. And so it's actually a challenge to get hunters to harvest more than a couple of deer. But those depredation permits that we provide to farmers who report crop damage helps in that regard. They can incentivize hunters that want to come and harvest more does to come to their property. So it's a mutually beneficial thing.
Well, thank you for that, dear. But I want to congratulate Fish and Wildlife for the great job they've done on restoring animals, and particularly deer and elk and turkeys and so forth. When I was a kid growing up, all my dad's people were farmers and they were meat hunters. And a rabbit crossed their land, he'd have to pack a lunch or something because he's going to be shot somewhere before he got off of there. And there were times, but of course there were no turkeys left in Kentucky at one time. But I congratulate you all for the great job you all have done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. We're very proud of our staff. And of course, we have a lot of partners. The support of the legislature is vital in a lot of different ways, from regulations to policies that support our conservation efforts, and private landowners and farmers are also vital, as well as nonprofit organizations. So thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Brian. I'd like to echo what Representative Birch said. Growing up in Eastern Kentucky, for me, you would think that we would just have bountiful turkey and deer, but we didn't. And I'm sure Senator Turner probably remembers you couldn't hunt. There wasn't any, there was no game. And I will have to say people like Doug Hensley and many other people in Fish and Wildlife really buckled down and brought back a thriving industry for us. But I can remember having to travel to Crittenden or somewhere in central Kentucky or northern Kentucky to be able to hunt deer from the mountains of eastern Kentucky. So they've done an amazing job. But we don't have so much getting into crops, but what we do have is our elk get into the cemeteries. And they get into some of these old cemeteries and they'll step through an old grave. And so we get calls from time to time. I'm sure Senator Webb's probably had a couple of them where you'll have somebody really hot at you about a elk that seems that you just can't keep them out of a spot. But we have relocated a couple of them so they don't mess up crops as much as they do some of our old cemeteries that we've got in eastern Kentucky. But
Mr. Chairman, I'd be remiss if Doug Hensley learned everything he knows from Doc Webb. So
here to Doc Webb. Those guys took a task that was really pretty bleak, and you still had a lot of people hunting for game then. So as soon as they could get anything stocked back in, it'd be cleared out, and so they really had to play both a tough hand issue with a lot of the local population, keep them from harvesting it enough for us to get a crop back. So not an easy job, but one certainly well done for Fish and Wildlife. I think you guys have got a great guy at the helm right now. Rich Storm's a fantastic leader, and I expect great things to continue to come out of Fish and Wildlife. So thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the patience of all the members of our meeting today. I know it ran a little bit longer than what we normally do. Does anybody have any questions for our Fish and Wildlife guest before we let him step up? All right, does any of our members have any questions or comments as we close? Senator Turner. That's all right, and I want to make sure, Senator Wheeler came in, that we make sure we cover him. And I know Representative Wesley had tried to get on and couldn't as well. So let's make sure we got everybody that participated logged in there as far as having credit for attending today. Well, seeing no further comments coming from our members, with a motion to...
This Senator Embry, did she get my presence?
CB Embry. Did we get Senator Embry's? Are you in the Amex, Senator Embry? Are you?
No, I'm at home.
All right, you're in your district. Very good.
District, yes.
Very good. Thank you. And with